Jared Parry for Boxing Social in association with Empire Fight Sport and Forged Irish Stout. Delighted to be joined by Andy Clarke. We're here in Cardiff. Jessica McCaskill against Lauren Price. A huge fight. The first fight for the Olympic gold medalist Lauren Price in a world title. How do you feel about this one?
I think it's a really good fight. I think it's definitely a hard fight because McCaskill's never lost at welterweight, and you know what you're going to get from her, which is a hard night. She's always physically very fit. She's a rugged fighter, a strong fighter. Technically, maybe not the best, but she'll keep coming and coming and coming, and can be quite unorthodox at times. So it's a difficult fight for Price. She'll need to turn in a career best performance to get the win. This is a proper world title fight. This is no kind of easy touch by any stretch. If she wins this, then she's beaten the number one fighter in the division, because McCaskill has to be that, because she was undisputed and she's never lost a welterweight.
Do you think McCaskill's been slightly overlooked because the homecoming and it's the Olympic gold medal everyone's talking about with Lauren Price? Do you think a lot of people are forgetting the accolades that McCaskill actually brings into this fight?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think within boxing, for people who follow the sport closely, no, because we know what she's done. But for a kind of wider audience, I think probably yes, because the expectation will be that Price will win. More general sports fans, or kind of even non-sports fans who know her because of the gold medal, the expectation will be that she'll win because that's what she does, and they won't probably look into McCaskill too much. So I think in that regard, and you always want to try and break into that mainstream. I think the expectation within Wales will be that, not that this is a foregone conclusion, but that it'll be that she'll win. It's a kind of pressure and expectation level that's difficult to prepare for, I think. And she might not really be feeling it now, but I think she probably will feel it when she's walking to the ring tomorrow. And that's not to say it doesn't work as a positive, but it's kind of interesting when you hear someone say this is like just another fight. I know what they mean by it, but it isn't.
So I want to move away from this card a bit now. A big news story this week has been about Ryan Garcia. It was a very bizarre build-up to his fight with Devin Haney. He came out on top in that fight. It's come out since that he's failed 2 drug tests for Ostarine. Just what's your take on all of this?
Well, the build-up was bizarre, and I think some of it was smoke and mirrors, but I never really believed that it all was. He missed the weight by a mile, and that's not good. You sign a contract to fight at £140. Your primary obligation is to make that weight. Sometimes it can't be done. You outgrow it, or you have an injury that means that the weight making is hindered. But if that's the case, then you're going to know a reasonable amount of time out from the weigh-in that you're going to miss it, if you end up missing it to the tune of £3. So I would have liked to have seen him tell Devin Haney that, to give him the option to weigh in at 143. But he didn't. He just came in heavy. It doesn't sit well with me. And since then, he's come out that he's failed 2 tests with VADA, who were the accepted kind of gold standard of testing. And what has to happen now? He absolutely has to be given his chance to defend himself and explain himself. 100%, that has to happen. But if it turns out that he doesn't have a valid explanation for it, then he has to be properly punished. Because the problem we got with PEDs is that is there a deterrent really for doing it? I mean, Conor Benn, by the British Boxing Board of Control, has paid a heavy price because he's 2 years down the line now and he still can't box in the UK. But he's been able to box in America. Alicia Baumgartner just kind of seemed to clear herself. I don't know the ins and outs of that one too much, but there's no uniformity or consistency. And we're used to that because in boxing that's hard to come by in all sorts of areas, because we have all sorts of boards of controls and commissions and sanctioning bodies, and they are sanctioning bodies, they're not governing bodies. Sometimes people describe them as governing bodies, but they're not. So we all know the problems, but unless there's a sufficient deterrent punishment for being found guilty of taking a performance-enhancing drug, you do the risk versus reward. Some professional athletes will, and they'll decide that the risk is worth it. But we can't have that. We can't have that situation.
We're going to go into a bit more of a lighter note. Boxing in the UK, all the big cards seem to be going to Saudi Arabia. We've got a big one next week, but there's also talk of a 5v5 card in Wembley Stadium in the UK in September. What's your thoughts on all of that? And we're hearing it could be spearheaded by Anthony Joshua's return to the UK, which I think a lot of the British fight fans are looking forward to.
Yeah, and they're taking a card to LA, aren't they, in early August as well. So that, I think it's a key development really, because the worry is that we just will never see a really big fight involving a British fighter in the UK again if they're all going to go to Saudi Arabia. And we all understand why they would, because it's a short career and you need to make as much money as you can. So I never have any quarrel with that. But it's great that the Saudis seem happy to kind of spread it around, because there's no reason why they should, fund the show at Wembley. Why should they do that? Or in LA? But the fact that they're happy to do it is great, because we'll get to see Joshua back in the UK. I think the Fury-Usyk rematch is scheduled to be in Saudi Arabia, but I mean, imagine if they decided, well, let's maybe do that one in the UK. That kind of thing, it just opens the door to those sorts of possibilities, which is definitely a good thing.
You mentioned the LA card. It's absolutely stacked. Some fantastic fights on there. For me, the one that stands out, Tim Tszyu and Virgil Ortiz. There's been a bit of a debate though since. Eddie Hearn has come out and said he thinks it's the best card America has ever seen. A lot of people are arguing some of the Don King cards from back in the 90s top that. But what's your thoughts on the card? Is it one of the best that America might have seen for a long time?
Yeah, I think so. It's just a really, really good card. Everybody gets obsessed with kind of ranking things, don't they? And it's just not really necessary. It's a really, really good card. Nobody could ever argue with that. As for whether it's better than this or better than that, that's a subjective thing. It's impossible to quantify, really. It's just a really good card. That fight you mentioned, that is a tremendous, tremendous fight. And obviously Crawford, that'll be really interesting. I kind of want to see what Andy Ruiz has got left to offer us, because I feel like it's quite a lot, but we haven't really seen that much of him since he lost the rematch to Joshua. I think he's got a few regrets about that, and there's things he still wants to do. So yeah, it's just a really good card.
Another bit of breaking news we've had in the UK recently: Chris Eubank Jr. has become a free agent, no longer with Wasserman Boxing. Where could you see Chris Eubank Jr.'s career taken? And there was not so long ago links to him fighting potentially against Terence Crawford. Obviously now he's fighting Madrimov. Can you see Chris Eubank Jr. being in a world title position by the end of the year?
I don't know. He's kind of he's a fascinating one, Eubank Jr., because that middleweight division that he's in is probably at its least commercially valuable that it's been for quite a long time. You feel like he should want to win a world title, but he's gone this long without doing it, that I don't know how important that is to him. So a fight against Janabek, for example, although it looks great on paper, it's a really hard fight, and he might feel like there are other fights he could get for better money and a bigger profile. And if he can, then I expect that's what he'll do. He is a big draw, and he's the kind of guy who might be able to get a big name over to the UK and put it in a stadium maybe, and that's always going to be attractive to an overseas fighter. But that fight that looked like it was probably always going to be there against Conor Benn, I don't see that ever happening now, because that has to be in the UK for it to really catch fire. So he's in a little bit of a difficult position, to be honest. I'm really curious to see what he'll do next. And becoming free promotionally for him I think that's kind of what he's always preferred. I think he's steered his own ship, hasn't he, most of the time, even whatever promoter he's been with.
Slight question on, obviously, the middleweight division as a whole. We've seen this week Jamal Charlo has been stripped of his WBC title. Carlos Adamez has been elevated to full world champion. With Chris Eubank Jr., could you see that as an attractive fight to pick up the green and gold belt? Yeah,
I feel like he would want to win a world title. It's not, and just have a world title fight. There's no saying that he'll beat these guys, but I'd have thought so. Maybe now that the Saudis have done an American show, maybe he's kind of eyeing those possibilities. One of the kind of downsides of somebody coming in and paying all the money that they have, and there's always someone doing it. There was BBC a while ago. DAZN kind of did it for a little bit. Usually someone's doing it. So everybody talks about distorting the market, but generally there's always somebody distorting the market to the point where that's kind of the market, but this is next level stuff. The problem with it is that fighters will look at that and they feel like that's what they need to be concentrating on. And whilst you're trying to make that happen, you're not doing anything else. And I get it, but at the same time, it's a slightly dangerous game to play. But yeah, I feel like he should want to box for the WBC title, but he's a difficult man to second guess, isn't he?
I'm going to finish on the note that a lot of people are already talking about. We're only 1 week away, the undisputed heavyweight world title fight, Tyson Fury, Oleksandr Usyk. Has your mind changed on prediction all the way through the build-up? Because I think many people's has.
I just make it a really, really close fight now, and that's a massive cop-out, I know, but I kind of always felt like Fury has got the skill to make the size count, which I'm not sure anybody else has. And if he weighs what he's been weighing, then and Usyk weighs what he's been weighing, I think Fury might be a bit lighter than recent times, but not a lot. Usyk will be exactly where he's been the last 3 fights. There's probably going to be about 50 pounds between them. Now that is a lot. There's no way around that. That's a lot of weight, and if you can use that in the right way, you can make things very difficult for your opponent. And I've always felt like Fury would be able to do that. But there are questions, because you could argue his last really good performance was the second fight against Wilder. He was terrible against Ngannou. Is that evidence that he's on the decline to a serious degree, or did he just not take that fight seriously and it's going to prove to be the kick up the arse that he really needed? We'll find out on the night. But what we know with Usyk is that he's very, very consistent. There is a level of performance that will emerge from Usyk that I think we can absolutely rely upon. So if Fury's going to beat him, Fury's going to need to be as good as he's ever been. And that's the question, is he still or not?
Well, thank you very much for your time, Andy. Always good to get your take on things, and hopefully catch up with you maybe after the fight this weekend.
Yeah, sure.